Would you like to make some tiny lino cuts with me? Settle in, friends, let's follow this whim and see where it takes us. For this first one, I'm cutting down a larger piece of lino, and it's a funny bit of lino. It's more like a slice of rubber, all bendy, and I cannot for the life of me remember where it came from. Anywho, I'm using my craft knife to splice it into a small square, and ta-da! Alright, what shall we carve on this one? As it's my first tiny lino, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I've never carved a lino this small before, so I'm not sure how tricky it might be to navigate. To start, let's just get a border sorted. 4 simple lines around the edges of the block. Bring on the tools! To carve this little doobry, I'm using my handy beginner's set, which unscrews to reveal a bunch of nibs which I can slot into the handle. For this border, I'm choosing one of the V-shaped nibs. In carving the first line though, I realise I've picked up the thinner of the V-nibs, and look, the line is really delicate. I think I need the border to be a bit stronger, so let's swap out to the bigger V-nib. Yeah, much better. I'm drawing a simple symmetrical pattern of shapes, basically using the corners of the square as points for the shapes to grow from. But I want to get carving, so I'm not going to draw every part right now. I'll add bits in as we go. I've swapped back to the smaller V-nib, and how lovely is this curly-whirly lino noodle? It is so small and twisty. I will say, as I start carving, it's immediately apparent that it's hard to hold on to tiny linos. It's a cheeky little rubbery what's-it. Deciding on where to place my fingers so that they can wield enough pressure to hold the block steady, but also to have them avoid the path of the carving tool. However, I do find somewhat of a rhythm, even if it means my fingers are bending into weirdy S shapes and turning funny colours. Just to note, you can get things like bench hooks and corner thingies, I'm not sure what they're actually called, that you can push lino cuts against, which might make this easier. I do have this thingy that came with my carving tool, but to be honest, I don't get on with it. I find it harder to use than just holding onto the lino. So the outlines are done, and now I fancy gouging out some chunkier bits of the pattern. It's handy having carved the outlines first because it makes taking away the inner bits of the shape a lot easier. I swap back to my chunkier V-nib and away I go. Here's a handy tip that I really enjoy using. When you've carved out most of your lino design, you can get an idea of how it might print by taking a rubbing from it. Here I'm using a thin piece of notepaper and a graphite stick. Let me tell you, this act alone is so very satisfying to do. Did you ever do this as a kid? I remember taking rub-ins of all kinds of things with crayons and paper. The pavement, the walls, a fire hydrant cover, bricks, whatever I could see. And for lino cuts, it's super handy because it gives you a sense of the overall design and you can spot areas which might need more work. After seeing the rubbing, I think I need to add some contrast in the side areas, so I'm removing some tiny points. And this is where I'm going to stop carving on this one. However, before we print it, I want to quickly do a second tiny tile using dots. Let's go. Okay, this tile is a little bigger than the first and is using my last piece of more traditional lino tile. It's the type with the hessian on the back. I'm sketching out the basic layout that I'm going to try. I want to create circular flowers made up of clusters of dots. Some of them will break through the border while others will stay inside. Then I'll carve leaves in between the flowers with my V nib. I have an etching needle that I mostly use for dry point printmaking, and essentially it's a case of just pushing the needle into the lino repeatedly to create lots of little holes. I will say it's a bit of a strenuous task on the hands because you do need to use firm pressure, but I took it slow and had regular finger wiggle breaks. In order to keep them looking like flowers rather than just a circle of dots, I put the dots in clusters and it works pretty well. Now all of the dots are done, we can grab the trusty V nib and carve out the border and leaves. Lastly, on this one, I'm using the V-nib in a push in, flick out action on patches of the dots, just to add a few bigger dots for a little variation. Come on, you little bitty linos, let's print you out. I have my Essdee water-based black ink, which I'm only using a small blob of, and then I'm smearing it into a line which I can plop my roller into. I'm rolling the ink out into a patch and trying to get my roller covered evenly. Then I can roll it onto my tiny linos. It goes onto my first tile really smoothly, but the second hessian lino has a slight bend to it and takes a bit more faffing. I'm also wary of inking this second one too much in case any ink fills into the holes, so I'm going a bit light-handed. As a test, I'm using a piece of notepaper to cover both tiles and squashing the little dears as hard as I can. On peeling up the print, there is definite stuff to enjoy. The tiniest tile inked really well, with the pattern coming out so clearly, and although the second isn't as clear, the textures are sweet. However, I know that we can get that second one printed better, so I'm re-inking my roller and having another go. On this one, I figured out the trick of placing the tile on a piece of paper which I could hold it steady with rather than trying to hold onto it with my fingers. I may be slow, but I get there in the end. In pressing this one, I'm bringing in my random piece of wood, which I'm using for some added pressure. Let's see how it's come out. Oh, well, I am giving that a big old yes. I love it. Look how well those dots have come out. So clear, and I think they really do look flower-like. I think tiny Linocuts are a great way to test out techniques, materials and ideas. Neither of these linos are perfect. I feel like the pattern tile could have used a bit more black variation in the centre petals, and the leaves in the second tile were a bit unbalanced across the design as a whole. But they are excellent practice pieces which were fun to make, and they have given me a chance to test out the dotting technique and experiment with making smaller carvings. Are you a tiny lino lover? Let me know what kinds of things you like to carve in lino, or if you're thinking of giving it a try. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I really hope you had a jolly time. If you did, please do consider clicking the like button, as it feels like the equivalent of you giving me a friendly wave, which is so cozy. And if you fancy popping back here another day for more creative wanderings, click subscribe. It's lovely having you here. I hope we get to hang out again soon. Stay curious, keep making happy, and I will see you next time.